This slide is an overview of the UK tax system and how it works. You have on the blue box, which is the UK domiciled individual, and the green box is a non-UK domiciled individual. And I'll explain a little bit more in a second about how that works. Down the left-hand column you have income, capital gains and inheritance tax, the three core taxes in the UK. Alongside those, we distinguish between UK sources of income and non-UK sources of income, UK capital and UK assets on which you might make a capital gain, and non-UK, and inheritance tax, again, UK assets versus non-UK assets. If you look along the blue box, if you're UK domiciled and also resident in the UK, as I am, then unfortunately there's a tick alongside every type of tax in respect of every type of asset. So I'm taxable on everything on a worldwide basis. If I were to go non-resident, then I may still be liable to tax on any money I make in the UK, for example, from property, renting out a property. But otherwise, I don't pay tax on any income I make outside the UK. I don't pay any capital gains tax at all on even UK status assets, but I am still liable for inheritance tax on my worldwide estate. The green box is someone who's not UK domiciled. That's someone who does not effectively originate from the UK. And here the regime is much more beneficial even if you're a UK resident, because essentially the difference is, rather than being taxed on your worldwide income and gains, you're only taxed on anything outside the UK if you bring it into the UK to live on or to spend. So for example, if you made some rent from a non-UK property, then if you brought that rent in or any part of it into the UK, then you'd only be taxed at that particular point. If you're non-UK domiciled, so I should go on to say actually if you're UK resident or non-UK resident, then you are liable to inheritance tax on UK situs assets, i.e. assets in the UK, but not if those assets are overseas. So I'll just bring some of those points to life through the next few slides. So domicile, this concept of domicile, it's very important to distinguish between domicile and residence. Even our UK tax authority can sometimes gets it wrong. Domicile is essentially a much more long-term concept. It looks at your domicile in the jurisdiction in which you regard as your permanent home. It's not the same as nationality or residence. They are different concepts. And you must have a domicile, and you can only have one domicile at a time. Domicile is taken from your father, unless you're illegitimate, in which case it's taken from your mother, i.e. if you were born outside of marriage. But generally speaking, it's taken from the father. Whatever your father's domicile was at the point of your own birth, that's your domicile of origin. And that's your domicile which goes with you for the rest of your life, unless you acquire a domicile of choice. If you do acquire a domicile of choice, that would supersede your domicile of origin for so long as that choice has been maintained. Now, it is very difficult to establish a domicile of choice. Just going to live in another country would not extinguish your domicile of origin. You've got to be able to show that you want to go and live in another country and you intend to live there for the rest of your days, and you have severed your ties with your domicile of origin. So domicile of origin is incredibly adhesive in nature and very difficult to shake off, and we'll try and bring that to life with an example a little bit later on. Residence is very different. So domicile is much more a long-term concept. Where's your settled home? Residence is more short-term, which is where do you live year to year. Up until April this year in the UK, we had a very unsatisfactory system around determining your residence. Many countries make it simple. They say if you spend more than half the year in the country, then you are resident. In the UK, we've never made it that simple. It depends very much on whether you start as a UK resident or whether you come to the UK for the first time. But the rules can be very complex. there is a statutory residence test. Because of the ambiguity about the old system, there is now a system which is much clearer, or much more certain, I should say. It's still hideously complex, but it does, provided you understand how it works, it does give you certainty around whether or not you're resident in the UK. But it's still not a simple concept. It's still not as simple as saying if you spend less than half the year in the UK, you're not resident. Unfortunately, we don't see it that way. And you can potentially be UK resident, even coming to the UK for the first time, if you spend more than 45 days here. Just following that through, these statutory residence rules, which are effective from April this year. There are two ways of looking at it. The first is if you're in full-time work, then if you're full-time working outside the UK, then you are treated automatically as non-UK resident, provided you spend less than 90 days in total in the UK. And of those 90 days that you spend in the UK, you can't be working for more than 30 of them. Working means spending more than 3 hours in that day performing your work duties. So essentially, full-time working outside the UK, you're non-resident. On the flip side, if you're full-time working in the UK, then you're automatically UK resident. That means also that you can't spend, you must spend 75% of your total working days must be in the UK to qualify under that particular head. Now, if you don't qualify as either non-resident or resident under those two tests, then you fall onto the third bucket, and that depends on the number of days you spend in the UK, and spend means where you are at midnight on that particular day, and the number of ties that you have to the UK. And these are the ties. There are 5 of them. The one is that you've got dependent family who live in the UK, i.e. a spouse, children, that sort of thing. The second is whether you have accommodation which is made available for your use for more than 91 days in that year. The third tie is if you spend more than 40 days working in the UK. That's another tie. The fourth tie is if you spent 91 or more days in the UK in either of the previous 2 tax years. That's another tie. And the last one is if you're in the very happy position of not really having to do much work and you just travel from country to country. If you spend more days in the UK than any other country in the year, that's a tie as well. Now, the number of ties you can have against the number of days you can spend in the UK differ depending on whether you are an arriver or a leaver. And the essence of that is it's easier to obtain UK residency than it is to lose it. Now, you're an arriver if you haven't been resident in the UK in any of the three previous tax years. Tax years run from 6th of April through to the 5th of April. You're a leaver if you have been resident in any of those, any one or more of those tax years. And if you're an arriver, you can spend a bit more time in the UK before being treated as a resident than if you're a leaver.